General Hospital spoilers for the week of June 2nd to 6th reveal that the Wiley and Amelia custody hearing has officially begun. In a tense and suffocating atmosphere that has captured the attention of all of Port Charles. Behind the courtroom doors, where the law is considered the final word. The familiar faces sitting across from each other are no longer the people who once shared family dinners, but people who are fighting for control, for recognition, and above all, for the right to decide the lives of two innocent children. But behind the solemnity lies a series of unexpected adjustments, unnamed obsessions. And a legal battle that is gradually revealing secrets that some have tried to hide for years. At the center of the battle is not just Michael, Willow, Drew, or Carly, but the fierce confrontation between two veteran lawyers, Rick Lansing and Diane Miller. Each brings a strategy, a legal ideology, and a ruthlessly sharp approach. Diane, in her dark suit and cold gaze, represents Michael, a father trying to protect his two children from the turmoil that comes from his broken relationship with Willow and Drew's recent shady dealings. Rick stands on the other side of the aisle, representing Drew and Willow, or at least what's left of their former alliance, with a singular goal. To overthrow Michael and prove that he's unworthy of being the legal guardian of Wiley and Amelia. Through pointed questioning and strategically placed evidence, Rick and Diane begin to dredge up dark corners of the past that neither wants to revisit. Rick brings up details about Jason's kidnapping, suggesting that Michael was behind the illegal takeover of Amelia. Diane didn't hesitate to point out that Willow had been hiding her mental health, claiming she wasn't stable enough to care for a child under the stress of her current circumstances. And it was during these tug-of-wars that secrets that had been buried began to rise to the surface. One of the biggest shocks of the hearing came from a file that Rick unexpectedly submitted, a document that was said to be a transcript of a private conversation between Carly and the family therapist, in which Carly admitted that Willow had shown signs of postpartum depression but had not sought treatment. Eyes turned to Willow, and she was stunned. Any defense was now flimsy as the person closest to her revealed what she had tried to hide for months. Michael, though still sitting upright, couldn't hide the slight disappointment as he looked at Willow. Diane quickly countered by presenting internal hospital records that showed Drew had deliberately concealed Amelia's father's name from medical documents, attempting to register himself as legal guardian without a court order. This stunned the courtroom, especially when the judge ordered an urgent investigation into the falsification of documents and tampering with a child's medical records. What had been a civil dispute now began to turn into a criminal investigation, with the Crown Attorney and Child Protection Department involved. In the chaos of legal tactics and shocking details, it became clear to those present, this was no longer a fight for the good of Wiley and Amelia, but for reputation, power, and personal survival in a family rotten from the inside. Rick, with his calm exterior, is running the show, gradually pushing the conflicts to the surface, no matter the cost. Diane, with her skill and coldness, does not hesitate to fight back with all the data she has, as long as she maintains Michael's image as a model father in the eyes of the court. Left, in the eye of the storm, are Wiley and Amelia, two children who cannot speak, but are being torn away from the most normal things of childhood by adults trying to prove who is more worthy. And it is in that silence that the most haunting thing becomes clear. No one is really fighting for them, but for ego, for control, and for the fear that if they lose, they will lose everything, not just custody, but the right to exist in this family. The trial has only just begun, but Port Charles can already sense the great change coming. And if things continue to escalate the way Rick and Diane are pushing them, not just one, but many lives will be thrown into a chain of irreparable destruction. Once again, the law, the place where justice and protection are supposed to be, becomes the arena for the most intense psychological battles, and behind the courtroom doors, a new shock is slowly emerging like a smoldering fire waiting to burn everything down. Sasha is thrown into a spiral of chaos that she cannot control. As crazy new adjustments begin to dictate every step of her life, a series of changes that seemed unimaginable, but are becoming a reality. She is no longer the woman who emerged from the darkness of psychological trauma with a strong will, no longer the symbol of courage and recovery from a series of mental shocks. Now, Sasha is facing a devastating truth. the secret of her unborn child, the child she tried to protect from scrutiny and judgment, is gradually being pushed into the light. And when that truth is linked to the name Michael Corinthos, the powerful man who once dismissed her as a useless wound, everything begins to crumble beneath her feet, bit by bit. Sasha had thought she could keep this secret, that by remaining silent and carrying the baby in secret, she could protect the child from the machinations and pressures that the Corinthos and Quartermain families always brought to any being related to them. But when Michael began to sense that an old relationship might influence the custody battle for Wiley and Amelia, he took action in secret. The lawyers, the shady deals, the late-night phone calls, all aimed at one goal: to silence Sasha, to deny Michael's biological connection to the baby. And Sasha, as strong as she was, couldn't help but feel strangled. She was followed, questioned, pushed into closed-door meetings with lawyers without the right to argue. One of the most infuriating adjustments was the need to sign a document that renounced the child's legal rights to the Corinthos family, an act that virtually erased Michael's existence from the child's life, as if he had come from a nameless void. It was not only an insult, but also a blow to her dignity, sending Sasha into a state of panic and inner turmoil like never before. She began to live in a state of suspicion, seeing everyone as someone who might reveal the secret she was trying so hard to protect. Every look, every inquiry, became an emotional assault. She didn't know who was still on her side, who had already turned to Michael, who was trying to force her into a mold of their own making. And it was in this crisis that Sasha began to behave strangely, losing sleep, having panic attacks, and even pulling out of a prenatal appointment because she felt surrounded by prying eyes. A new obsession grips her, no longer memories of loss, but the fear of being erased from her role as mother to her own child. Michael, in his cold political calculation, is no longer a former lover, but a force Sasha cannot fight back with words or emotions. He doesn't need to raise his voice. He has power, lawyers, and a system ready to make Sasha a problem to be dealt with, rather than a person enduring a painful and lonely journey to motherhood. The crazy adjustments continue. Michael offers lifelong financial support, as long as Sasha leaves Port Charles after the birth and never reveals the true identity of the father. He even offers the option of placing the baby in a secret foster home, as if the child's existence is an inconvenience rather than an undeniable part of her flesh and blood. That's when Sasha realized that the truth was no longer protected by morality or sentiment, but buried by power and reputation. She began to ask herself, if she remained silent, how would her child live? Would it grow up as a secret? A shadow? A burden rejected by the very person who created it? And if she went public, would she still be safe? Would she still have a chance to raise her child? Or would she be seen as a troublemaker, in the perfect picture Michael was building? On lonely nights, Sasha would put her hand on her belly and wonder if her child could feel the storm raging outside. Would the child know that he was at the center of a war he never chose? And would she still have the strength to fight for both of them, when everything around him was being adjusted to insanity, when every decision, every breath could be a weapon against her? Sasha's story was no longer an isolated tragedy. It symbolizes a life where power can rob a mother of her identity and voice. And if no one speaks up, this shock, the denial, the silence, the fear that power carries, will not only haunt Sasha, but become a lasting stain on the Corinthos family history that no one can deny. Gio is pushing Brook Lynn away, not with harsh words or explosive anger, but with a cold, deliberate distance, as if every connection between them had never existed. It's a calculated silence, a slow, painful withdrawal, as Gio begins to realize that the people he once saw as his anchors, his home, are the very ones who chose to hide from him the most important truth of his life. And now, as the secrets surrounding his true identity, his birth mother being Brook Lynn, his life orchestrated by those bearing the Quartermain name, gradually come to light, Gio is no longer the vulnerable teenager he once was. He is a young man actively choosing how to survive amidst the wreckage of everything he thought was real. His distancing from Brook Lynn isn't just an emotional reaction, it's the result of a series of quiet yet calculated shifts within the family. Brook Lynn, realizing she is slowly losing her son, the son she once believed she could win back with genuine affection, begins to make profound adjustments. She no longer tries to explain. No longer pleads for forgiveness, but instead takes a step back, along with Ned, to craft a long-term plan to stabilize the chaos unraveling around them. Because they understand that the wounds Gio carries can't be soothed by words alone, but require action, consistency, and above all, patient silence. Ned, as a father who once failed to keep the family intact, is now reevaluating the entire emotional and power structure of the household alongside Brook Lynn. They can't change the past. But they can reconstruct the future, a future where Gio doesn't feel controlled, where he's allowed to choose his own path, and where Brook Lynn isn't a mother compensating with power, but one who offers acceptance and steps back at the right moment. These adjustments, though subtle, reveal that both Brook Lynn and Ned have come to understand the importance of letting Gio define his own identity, free from the manipulation of the Quartermaine name. However, this transformation isn't happening in a vacuum. Those around them can sense the shifting power dynamics within the family. Tracy quietly watches every move, ready to exploit any slip-up to reassert control. Lois stands in the middle. Witnessing both her daughter and grandson being pulled into a spiral of hurt she can no longer shield them from with maternal instinct. And Dante, Joe's biological father, still hasn't decided whether to fully step into his role as a parent or maintain the cautious distance he's always kept. Amid these smoldering changes, Gio remains silent, but every action he takes signals a rising undercurrent. His refusal to attend family dinners, his absence from important events, even his long periods of no contact with Brook Lynn, these are no longer signs of teenage rebellion. They're the choices of someone fighting to reclaim control over his own life. And in that coldness is a clear message: Gio will not allow anyone, not even Brook Lynn, to redefine who he is. In this context, Brook Lynn and Ned have no choice but to continue adjusting. They begin to scale back their roles and decisions that affect Gio, while quietly reinforcing their presence, creating small opportunities to show Gio he can trust again, if he's willing to open up. From inviting him to take part in personal music projects instead of ELQ-related work, to letting him decide whether or not to attend family gatherings, every move is made with deliberate care. As if even one misstep could cause Gio to vanish forever from the fragile emotional connection they're trying to preserve. All of this points to a larger truth. The Quartermaine family is entering a period of genuine reconstruction. Gone are the political games and public confrontations. What remains is a chapter where each person must face themselves, their mistakes, their selfishness, the hurt they've caused one another. And from that reckoning, a new kind of transformation is emerging, not one of power, but of how they love, how they forgive, and how they allow others to exist independently within a family that has long been defined by control. Gio may continue to push Brook Lynn away, but what matters is that she no longer chases him in despair. She stands still, more mature, quieter, and understands that real love isn't something that demands immediate returns. It is something built day by day, through endurance, patience, and the hope that one day Gio will come back, not out of obligation, but because his heart wants to. And when that day comes, no one will need to push anyone away anymore, because the greatest distance isn't in where we stand, but in whether we feel truly wanted to return. Jason Morgan, once considered the last stronghold of the Corinthos and Quartermaine families, is now entering a new phase, calculated, but fraught with danger. After a long period of silence, observation, and restraint amid the rising family storms, Jason has finally chosen his moment to act. Not with violence or threats, as he once handled enemies in the criminal world, but with strategic maneuvers designed to protect what's left of the family's core legacy, especially what Monica left behind before her passing. This new phase begins with Jason quietly restructuring the financial architecture of the trust funds Monica had established. He redirects assets from funds controlled by Tracy and Drew into separate trusts for Danny, Scout, and future generations, a move made discreetly but with potentially explosive consequences if uncovered. It's not just an act of protection, it's a silent counterstrike. aiming to block the manipulation by those exploiting the chaos to seize full control over ELQ and the family's inheritance. However, this very move puts Jason at risk. His unilateral actions, taken without ELQ board approval or the legal executor's consent, have placed him squarely in the crosshairs. Not only of Tracy but also of former allies who have now turned against him, most notably Drew. Drew, already harboring deep suspicions after Jason concealed Monica's will and transferred benefits to Danny and Scout, now sees every new move as a clear sign of a power grab. The losses Jason is incurring aren't material, they're about trust and status within the very home he once silently protected. He's being pushed out of critical meetings. Monitored by lawyers Tracy has embedded in ELQ, and above all, treated as a potential threat to be neutralized. Those who once stood with Jason, Carly, Michael, even Sonny, are now being forced to choose sides as long-buried secrets rise, and not all are willing to stand with a man who acts on his own terms, without permission, without explanation. Jason's danger doesn't only come from legal corridors. Enemies from both the criminal underworld and the financial elite, once defeated, are starting to sense his vulnerability. Rumors swirl that figures once loyal to Cyrus Renault are resurfacing, ready to strike those they perceive as weak points in the current defense structure. And Jason, the once feared enforcer with a gun at his hip, is now a target, having stepped into the light to fight with laws instead of bullets, to protect assets instead of lives. Yet Jason remains unshaken. He is no longer blindly loyal, to Sonny, to Carly, or even to Michael. What drives him now is a quiet conviction that if he doesn't stand up, no one else will be clear-headed enough to keep the family from collapsing. He faces these new dangers with the calm of a battle-hardened warrior. With the mind of a man who understands the rules of this house better than anyone. Still, that sacrifice may go unrewarded. Jason could be fully ousted from ELQ. Accused of exploiting legal loopholes to manipulate Monica's estate. He could lose his final connection to Danny, especially if Scout is dragged into the conflict and Drew intensifies his opposition. In that moment, Jason would truly be alone, not the silent protector, but the one branded a traitor to his own family. Yet deep down, Jason knows, he doesn't act to be understood. He acts to protect. And if the price is isolation, danger, even loss, he's ready. Because once a family has been pulled into a web of inescapable schemes, someone has to remain fearless, unafraid of losing reputation. Of being misunderstood, of confronting those he once loved, to stand firm and do what must be done. Jason is moving. And with every step he takes, Port Charles inches closer to a new earthquake, where enemies will reveal themselves, where secrets will be exposed. And where this silent man may be the last one standing amid the ashes, or the first to be burned. Emma and Jocelyn, two names once synonymous with the light, the youth, and the hope of Port Charles's next generation, are now on the brink of a war like no other, one that transcends personal conflict and friendship, betrayal, and fear. They are entering a battlefield where the enemy carries no guns, no political power, no technological weapons, but the most dangerous weapon of all, the ability to manipulate minds, sow doubt, isolate victims, and keep them imprisoned in twisted beliefs disguised as ideology. Dalton is the nightmare that haunts them, not a ghost that storms in at night, but a gentle whisper that whispers into their minds day and night, stirring up vulnerability, encouraging rebellion, stirring a yearning for understanding, love, and guidance when the world outside is full of lies. Dalton does not appear loudly. He gradually infiltrated the safest spaces, classrooms, support groups, community meetings, even charity events. He never directly threatened, he simply listened, touched the weak spots that no one else saw, and in doing so, turned the most fragile souls into tools for an ideology he was building. Jocelyn. After a series of falls, from the breakup with Cameron, Oscar's death, Dex's betrayal, and the internal rifts in her family, was at her most vulnerable. She was no longer the strong girl who stood defiantly through the storms of the Corinthos family. Now she was a young woman with a series of raw cuts, searching for a place to belong. A confirmation that she was not invisible, that she was worthy of attention, that she was loved, and most importantly, that she had a purpose. Dalton saw it before anyone else. He approached Jocelyn not with traps, but with false understanding. In each conversation, each group chat he organized, Dalton gradually turned Joss's loneliness into a call to action. Turning her feelings of betrayal into a motivation to stand up against a corrupt system. Emma, on the other hand, sensed something was wrong from the first time she met Dalton. She had no proof. Just the intuition of someone who had grown up with Anna Devane, one of the sharpest figures in the intelligence community. Emma found Dalton's words too smooth, his eyes too calculating, and his manipulation of others' psychology too perfect. She began to follow, take notes, record, and even quietly reconnect with people who had disappeared after approaching Dalton. What she discovered was not just a potential threat, it was a system. The teens Dalton has approached have become estranged from their families, their behavior has changed. Some have gone missing for short periods of time for no apparent reason, and all have left behind the same mark, an unwavering loyalty to Dalton, to the point of cutting off all other ties. When Emma approaches Jocelyn with all this information, she is not met with trust. Joss, already in too deep, sees Emma as the only saboteur still clinging to her old prejudices. But Emma refuses to back down. She knows that if she lets Joss slide further, she will never get a second chance. And so Emma accepts being the bad guy in Jocelyn's eyes. As long as she has a chance to save her friend before it's too late. She approaches Trina, Spencer, and even Cameron, all of whom have a deep influence on Joss, to set up a secret network to track Dalton's movements, while also trying to expose him to the public. However, what both Emma and Jocelyn did not expect was Dalton's reaction. The backlash began. Emma's personal information was posted online. Her social media accounts were hacked. Her personal photos doctored and released. Word began to spread that Emma was making things up to get back at Jocelyn out of jealousy. At school, she was looked at with suspicion. And Jocelyn, seeing Emma's pictures everywhere, began to realize that something was terribly wrong, because if Emma was the attacker, why was she the one who suffered first? It was then that Jocelyn began to step back and observe. Dalton's words stopped being gentle and started to sound coercive. The conversations turned into coaching sessions. Advice turned into directives. And she began to see herself as less Jocelyn, as part of something much bigger, darker, and more dangerous. She remembers what Emma said, the clues she ignored. And the haunting begins to rise. It's no longer doubt, it's fear. Jocelyn decides to go back to Emma. Not with a hug, not with an apology, but with a silent look on a rainy night when they meet again on the steps of Kelly's house. No words are needed, they both know, time is running out. They must join forces. And this time, not to fight the truth, but to fight the thing that's consuming the town, silently, intelligently, and ruthlessly. Emma and Jocelyn's fight begins quietly. But it will end resoundingly, because if they fail, Port Charles will lose not just 2 girls, but a generation. And if they win, they will regain not just their freedom, but the truth, honor, and most of all, the friendship that Dalton can never tear apart. Sunny Corinthos, once the unshakable center of power in Port Charles, is now faced with a choice that has never been easy. Protect his family at all costs or be forced to let go of the relationships that have been the foundation of his life. Sunny's life has never been without turmoil, but this time, the change does not come from outside, but from those who were once his own flesh and blood, from seemingly invisible decisions that are slowly choking his power and beliefs. Michael, the son he loved and sacrificed everything to protect, is now a silent but calculating rival, a man who has chosen his own path and is no longer willing to follow his father's rules. The family crisis erupts not only because of personal conflicts, but because Sunny is pushed to the limit as new oppressive events increase. He can no longer control the hidden attacks from enemies and relatives, and the emergence of unexpected alliances between Michael, Drew, and part of the Quartermain family is completely changing the balance of power that he once firmly held in his hands. Sources in the underworld who had once been fiercely loyal to Sunny began whispering about a new era, a younger generation ready to replace, overthrow Or at least reshape the order that Sunny had built over his lifetime. What hurt Sunny most was not the loss of power, but Michael's slow-burning alienation and betrayal. He endured Michael's gradual retreat from his circle of influence, his choice of the law over violence, his siding with Sunny's former enemies in property disputes. Even his attempt to gain custody of Wiley and Amelia without ever seeking his father's advice or support. Each move Michael made was a knife in the trust that Sunny had cherished. And now, when everything is on the brink of collapse, when old enemies like Cyrus Renault are making a comeback, when new bosses are testing Sunny's limits, the person he needs most is the one who is creating a separate front against him. However, Sunny is not someone who is easily overthrown. He knows that weakness in this period will cost him everything. Therefore, new calculations have been implemented. No more direct meetings. No more massive presence of security forces. Sunny has switched to a remote control model, decentralized and covered in a way that no one can predict. He secretly monitors Michael, monitors Drew, and especially monitors unusual movements related to ELQ, where he suspects that there are underground financial activities that threaten the balance of the city. Sunny is not alone. Carly is still behind him, although she tries to keep her distance to protect her children. Ava, with her sharp wit and excellent reading of the situation, begins to cooperate with Sunny in an unexpected alliance. Both understand that to save themselves, they must push the war out of the family and into a larger game, a ruthless purge between old and new generations, between morality and power, between memory and reality. Sunny is planning to retaliate, but not with guns or blood. He chooses the path of his opponent's downfall, gathering evidence, expanding political relationships, interfering with the investments that Michael is building, and especially bringing personal secrets to light at the right time. What Michael is hiding, from the story of Sasha's unborn child to the hidden expenses in the ELQ system, can all become weapons if Sunny uses them at the right time, with the right people. But above all, what Sunny really wants is not victory. What he wants is the return of trust. He wants Michael to look back, wants the family to stop being torn apart by the schemes they thought were meant to protect each other. But if that doesn't happen, if Michael does choose to go all the way to the end of that path of rebellion, then Sunny is ready to become the destroyer. Not because he wants to, but because he has no other choice. In the midst of Port Charles's transformation, its disputed legacies, its intersecting political, familial, and criminal forces, Sunny remains a pillar that may be shaken, but never broken. And this time, when everyone thinks he's too tired to fight back, Sunny might surprise everyone, again.